Okay, we're live. So people are going to pile in soon, hopefully.
Cool. I just realised it's quite dark in here, isn't it? If I can turn that. Let me see if I can find another light to turn up. Hold on. Try to help a little bit as well. There we go. That's a little bit better. All the lights are behind me, I'm afraid, so I'm slightly in shadow. I'm upstairs in my kind of office well, it's kind of the landing, to be fair, between the bedrooms, but it's quite a nice space, so.
I don't know if anyone is joining.
Oh dear, won't get anyone join us after all now. I wasn't sure if we knew did you have to change the time?
I did change the time. I did let everyone know on Instagram as well. I'm just going to check my YouTube to see if it is live.
Okay, cool.
I have no idea how this works. Oh, okay, we are. There's 9 people watching. Okay, there's people.
Oh no! Oh no!
Oh, it's Megan. There she is. Okay, yeah, people are coming in. We're live.
Ah,
Yeah,
I was a bit worried that you might have said it was on 8 o'clock, and then I said, "Oh no, I can only do 7 o'clock."
No, I did. I think it's just a bit delayed with the comments as well. Okay, there's people here now. It's not just us two talking now.
Hooray! It's fine. We could just talk anyway. It's okay.
Right. So I have got some questions.
Okay.
And people will ask some as well. So, when you're writing, what is your process like? Like, do you have a specific thing you have to stick to?
Not really. I'm fairly disorganized, to be honest. I really just sit down and write. I don't have to have a certain routine or a certain kind of place or anything. I think it comes from having to write around other stuff. Like when I wrote the Chalkman, obviously I was working, I had a dog walking business, I had a 2-year-old, and really I just wrote whenever and wherever I could. And I think it's just hung over from that. So whenever I can write, I write, and I don't mind where I write, to be honest. As long as I've got my laptop, I'm perfectly happy. I do have this writing space now. I didn't used to have the writing space. So I've got this kind of writing space up here now. And that's nice to have a dedicated writing space. But yeah, really, as long as I've got my laptop, I can sit down anywhere and start churning the words out, really. I'm not particularly precious about it. I do think that, there are lots of reasons not to write. So sometimes if you sort of go, well, I have to have, I don't know, light these candles and sit in a certain space or go away to a writing retreat, in a way, sometimes it can all just be putting off the inevitable, which is just sitting down with a laptop and putting the words on the page, because ultimately that's what you've got to do to get to the end of the book.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer actually, because I know a lot of writers have to have specific ways of doing things, otherwise they can't do it.
Everybody's got a different approach, because for some people, if you have a set routine or a certain, I don't know, pen or a certain place to write, that's what gets you in the mood and works. But I mean, sometimes I say it can just be a case of procrastinating, and you've just got to get down and crack on with it.
Sorry, my nose is running so much.
I have every sympathy with you. As you can hear, I am still so croaky from my cold.
It's the time of year everyone's getting it now.
It is, and of course, the horrible thing is that you don't want to go anywhere with a cough or sounding ill.
But there's also that fear to begin with. I was like, oh my god, do I have coronavirus?
Well, unfortunately, it's the first thing that goes to your mind. And of course, you've just got, I've just got a cold. Of course, I've just got a cold. It's just a rotten cold. But yeah, you just worry now, don't you? My little girl had it first, and of course, the school are like, oh, if her temperature goes above 38, then you've got to get a test. She can't come in. We were like, test it. No, it's 37.8. It's 37.8. It's fine. It's fine. Because we knew it was just a cold. But of course, you also don't want to be irresponsible. So
I think it's just the worry now. This time of year is going to be bad for everyone getting ill. Then everyone's going to be like, is it COVID or is it a cold?
Yeah. And like I say, it's all the normal bugs going around that make us ill anyway. It's going to be a horrible few months, I think, really. Oh, I'm trying to straighten up my t-shirt, and then because I'm seeing myself in reverse, I'm pulling the wrong bit down and the wrong bit up. There you go, that's better.
Earlier with my hair, I was like trying to fix this side, fixing this side. Right. So does anyone have any questions they want to ask CJ? I can put them up, pin them when someone asks something. So. Almia says she likes your glass mug.
Haha, thank you. I have my skull mug. Good for drinking pints of squash or wine, you know, whatever. Whatever tickles your fancy.
Okay, well, until people comment, I'm going to ask you some questions again. So, what can we expect from the Burning Girls?
Oh,
without giving too much away, obviously.
The Burning Girls is kind of like, I'm sorry I'm so dark, I'm in shadow here. I can't make any light. Keep trying to see if I can get a bit more light on it. So yeah, the Burning Girls was kind of inspired because a couple of years ago we moved from Nottingham to this little village in East Sussex, which was quite a move actually, because we went from being somewhere quite urban to suddenly being somewhere really rural. And one of the first things I noticed as we drove into this small little village was this really strange little chapel sort of set back as we came into the village. And it was just really odd because it wasn't like a traditional church. It was very much like sort of a white Baptist type of chapel with like the graves running up to it. And it just looked really odd and kind of out of place and immediately quite creepy. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, goodness me, there's definitely got to be a story there. And so, yeah, so that kind of sparked the idea for the Burning Girls. I immediately wanted to set a book in this small kind of Sussex village or something like this small Sussex village. And then the more I sort of asked people about it and stuff, I realised there was quite a lot of quite gruesome history to sort of the area as well. I'm a lot tied up with the purge of Queen Mary, the purge of the Protestants, where, you know, a lot of martyrs were burnt. There's a very famous monument in Lewes, not far from here, for the Lewes martyrs, where I think it was about 10 villagers, men, women and children were burnt as martyrs for refusing to renounce their faith. So all of this started to feed into my imagination, and I started to think about this kind of like Wicker Man-esque type of thriller. So slightly gothic with all that kind of strange small village mentality. And I wanted to have quite an interesting protagonist, and I thought a vicar would be quite a good protagonist as well. Yeah. So the protagonist in The Burning Girls is a vicar, a single parent, who comes to the small village, who has a teenage daughter called Chapel Croft, after the previous vicar, well, they think the previous vicar just died. It turns out the previous vicar actually killed himself. So the tagline is that, you know, 500 years ago, 8 innocents were burnt to death. 30 years ago, 2 teenage girls mysteriously disappeared, and 2 months ago, the vicar of the parish killed himself. And now Reverend Jack Brooks and teenage daughter Flo have moved to Chapel Croft, and immediately, you know, strange things start happening. There's an old exorcism kit with a strange message left at the chapel for Jack, and other strange, creepy things and warnings left around. There's this strange ceremony that the village has every year on the anniversary of the purge of the martyrs, where these small little dolls called Burning Girls are burnt in memory of the martyrs. And these start being left around with other little creepy messages. And there's obviously some correlation with the events of 500 years ago and the disappearance of these teenagers 30 years ago. And indeed, stuff that's happening right now. And Jack, the vicar, also, you know, has a history that Jack is trying to escape, a slightly interesting past. So all these things sort of culminate in this small, very insular village. And yeah, it's hopefully very twisty and creepy and dark, as people have hopefully come to expect from my books. And yeah, it was fun to write it, but it was really hard work to write this one because there's a lot going on in it. Yeah. And it's kind of my longest book in terms of pages, I guess, and word count as well.
Yeah, so
a lot going on in there. So it was at times quite hard work. So it feels a bit like a labour of love getting this one out there.
Well, I kind of need it now, so January needs to hurry up. Good. Right. Okay, so we've got some questions now, so I'm gonna put them on the screen. So it's this one.
How do you deal with writing blocks? I'm quite fortunate. I've never had a proper writing block where I just you know, have no idea what I'm going to write next. Normally I have plenty of ideas, so even when I'm writing one book, I actually know what I'm doing for the next one, and I have another idea, and I normally have too many ideas. I do think that partway through most books, and I think most authors will say this, you hit something with a wall where you're suddenly like, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to bring this all together, or I don't know where this book is going, or I just hate this book, it's absolutely rubbish. And it's really difficult to carry on and force yourself to carry on writing. And I found that with every single book, I've hit that, excuse me, that kind of wall, I call it, often around the 200-page mark, funnily enough, where I just feel like everything I've written is awful and I'm never going to make this book work and it's a total disaster. And the only thing you can do is just plow on. Even when you know what you're writing is absolute rubbish and you hate it and you know you're going to end up rewriting it all, you just have to put something down, even if it's garbage, because you'll get to a point where it suddenly isn't rubbish anymore and you can see light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. And it's that old adage of you can't edit a page. So just getting anything down, I think, just gets the juices flowing. And hopefully you get to a point where you get something you thought, that's all right, I can work with that. Yeah. And then you suddenly start to find yourself on a roll again. So I think the only way to get rid of writer's block is to write, even if what you think you're writing is absolutely awful. I don't think you can wait for inspiration to come, because it won't. I think so. You've got to sort of write something, anything. Because if you sit around waiting for that great idea or that wonderful sentence or that brilliant start to the chapter, it won't come. Chances are you have to write something crap, and then, you know, hopefully when you come back to the edit, you will find that perfect line. You'll pluck it from somewhere else. So that's kind of how I deal with it.
So when you're writing a book, do you have everything planned before, like your plot twists, or do they come to you while you're writing?
No, I'm very much just write and see where you go. And then, you know, which keeps it interesting in one way, but does make it hard work in others. I think you end up fixing a lot in the edit.
Yeah.
I'd rather do that. I'd rather just get it all down, because it takes you in interesting directions. I mean, with the Burning Girls, there were lots of things that I didn't finally resolve until I was 3/4 of the way through. I still wasn't quite sure which way it was going to go. The book I'm writing now, I'm still haven't quite. I know the ending roughly,
yeah.
But actually I have just finished that draft, so I do know it now. But there are a few things I wasn't sure which way I was going to go with certain characters and things, right up until the final 50-odd pages probably. So I am very much somebody who writes on the fly. I'm not a planner. I'm a pantster.
But then that makes you even more creative, because like the way your books just turn out blow my mind every time.
Oh, thank you.
And the fact that you don't even plan these things out, they just come to you. That's just, I don't know how to do that.
I think it works for me because it takes me off in directions that some of the twists that come, I wouldn't have thought of if I tried to plan it out. It would have been a much more mundane book. But because I suddenly go partway through, oh, I could do that. Oh, what if I do this? And then I go off in a different direction. And the only difference is I think it makes it harder in editing, because you inevitably have to go back and change things at the beginning, and tweak things as you go along. And so, you spend the same amount of time, I guess, in a way, crafting it and plotting it and editing it. It just depends which way around you want to do it. If I had to sit and plan it all out at the start, I wouldn't be able to, actually. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I would be bored to tears. I would detest the book before I started writing it. It would just be like, oh God, I can't. So yes, that wouldn't work for me at all. But it's horses for courses, it works for some people. Everybody has a different, there's no right or wrong way. There simply isn't. That's just what works for me.
Right, so I've got this question as well. So which book have you written is your favourite?
Always the book that I haven't written yet. The book I haven't written yet is always my favourite, because there is always the lure of that wonderful new idea, that perfect idea that you haven't ruined yet by writing it. Because it kind of is never as good as it is in your head. I've got a real soft spot for Chalkman, because it was my first published book.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's my best book. But I am very, very proud of it, because it was the one that kickstarted everything. So I don't think I love all of the books in different ways. And if ever I think, oh, perhaps that book's my favourite or the best one I've written, I then remember bits about the other books that I really like. And I think you learn something with every book, and you try and push yourself with every book, hopefully. But yeah, my favourite book is always the book that I haven't written yet. The idea I have in my head. So the book I'm writing now, I loved. Well, it was an idea in my head, and I still love it. Now I'm in the process of editing it, which is the hard work bit.
Yeah.
So my favourite book is one I'm writing on the side at the moment, as a side project.
How many ideas do you have going at once?
Pardon?
How many ideas do you have going at once? Like for
I
different
always have an idea for another book after the one I'm writing. Always, 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 always. And I quite often have other ideas on the go. The one I'm writing at the moment may or may not be book 6. It may be something slightly different. It may be a side project because it's slightly different from some of my other books, but I love it so much because it's different. And I also have an idea for a novella that I really want to write based upon a short story that's coming out in a collection this month. So yeah, I've always got ideas for other things I want to do. But I think I think it's a good insurance policy because you always have an idea ready. So if you probably just want to say, well, what's your idea for book 6 or whatever, you've always got something to pull out the hat. And you can change your mind, obviously. But I like to have lots of ideas I can look forward to, I think. Yeah.
Well, I will buy whatever you publish. So.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
So Mia has said, how long do each of your books take to write?
The Chalkman, the first draft probably took about 9 months or so. Having a baby, really. Yeah, about 9 months for the initial draft of the Chalkman. But one thing I have learned with books is there are always more edits. So that was the draft that got me an agent. And then we worked on it again. We changed quite a few things in the edits. So the draft that went to publishers probably took about just over a year or so to write. And then there were more edits once I got signed to publishers. But the first draft, I normally would say 9 to 12 months. I would say, a very first draft, that the book I've just written, literally what I call my vomit draft, I wrote in about 3 months. That's unusually fast even for me. I'd normally say about 5 to 6 for the first vomit draft, the one that nobody can see, because nobody can see that. And then another 3 or 4 months to edit that into a palatable shape. But again, everybody takes a different amount of time. Some authors might take 2-3 years to write a book. I think it depends on the publisher as well, because I'm on a contract, which means I have to deliver a book a year. Yeah. So I really can't take any longer than 9 to 10 months to deliver a book, or it throws the whole publisher's schedule out of kilter, because they have to have time for editing and proofing and getting copies out to reviewers and so on and so forth. So once you are published, you are on a schedule, and I think, out of respect for the people you're working with, you have to stick to that schedule and those deadlines. But some authors will be given longer deadlines. Particularly historical authors, for example, quite often will sort of maybe have a 2-year turnaround, because obviously those sort of books require a much greater level of research and background work. So it depends, but I would say most authors would probably tell you. Most authors of crime novels, I think, will probably say, who are published, will probably say they write in about sort of 9 months to 12 months. Just have a don't cough.
Okay, so this is good. So who got you into reading, or what got you into reading?
Into writing, reading.
Sorry, I got with it.
I always loved to read, and I think inevitably from that came a love to write. And also I was just a really imaginative child. I was an only child. Excuse me. So I used to live in quite a fantasy world a lot of the time, making up. Sorry, I'm going to drink that coughing fit. Excuse me, terrible tickle in my throat. Yeah, I used to live in a bit of a fantasy world, I think. So I used to spend a lot of time making up stories day to day. Excuse me, I do apologise. So that was sort of, the thing that I used to like, this idea of fantasy worlds, and very quickly realised I could write down and create my own worlds with my own characters, or me or whoever in the stories. And I read a lot from an early age, and then I sort of got into things like Enid Blyton, and then Agatha Christie was my first sort of adult author I think I started reading. And then, because there weren't really excuse me, there weren't really YA authors when I was growing up, because I'm old. So you kind of went straight from kids' books to adult books. So I really sort of went from Enid Blyton to Agatha Christie. Then I discovered Stephen King. And then that was it for me, really. There was no looking back after discovering Mr. King. And of course, horror was really big in the 80s when I was a teenager. So I think, Stephen King, James Herbert, Dean Koontz, I read all of those voraciously from sort of probably age 11 onwards. And that really informed my writing, I think, from then on. I really wanted to write dark, creepy sort of mysteries. But I think, most writers, I think, most writers are voracious readers, I think. And that's generally what gets you into the idea of writing, because you start to want to do that, to create your own kind of fantasy worlds and characters and things.
Yeah. No, I think that's that blows my mind, because I'm not very creative at all, so I can't imagine coming up with this whole story and characters in my head. So for someone like you to do something like that, it's just, I just can't get my head around it. That's why I think it's so amazing, like reading.
Like that for ages. I think I used to read a lot and think, how would I ever sort of put a book together? Because I used to find it difficult with sort of my attention span. I'd have ideas, but I'd get bored quite easily. And for me, the biggest thing was finishing a book, getting over that wall and getting to the end of a book to finish writing it. Because I'd always be tempted by that new idea. So I'd get to that point, I'd write 100 pages or so and think, no, I'm not sure about this. I've got a better idea. That one will be far better. So it took me a long time to, I think, have the discipline to write and finish, a book, to get that 90,000 words or whatever it is down. And the first thing I wrote, I managed to complete as a novel was awful. People might say they're still awful, but no, it was absolutely dreadful. But I'd proved to myself that I could finish a book, and that was really important.
Okay, so we've got some more questions. So, what creepy books are your favourite?
Well, obviously, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. So, I love all of his books. Pet Sematary is one of my favourite books.
I thought you reading that, actually.
I remember reading that when I think it was about 12 or 13. And I remember staying up. It was probably a school night, I think. And I remember staying up like 3 in the morning because I just had no idea what was going on. And it has that lovely thing of foreshadowing, which I really like in books, where you know almost the awful thing that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you're waiting for that awful thing to happen. And because it tackles one of those subjects, like The Monkey's Paw is one of my favourite short stories. And obviously the Pet Sematary was inspired by The Monkey's Paw, and in the same way that The Taking of Annie Thorne is inspired by both. Of that question of, if the ultimate question of, if someone you love died, would you, and you had the opportunity to bring them back, that ultimate question. So I love Pet Sematary because I think it's hugely creepy. And I think another book that's creepy, I think, in a different way is Shutter Island, which again is one of my favourite books. By Dennis Lehane, because it has one of the best twist, I actually think, in probably any thriller or mystery book, and it has such a wonderful atmosphere as well. I mean, what could be better? Like basically an asylum on this rocky island, and it's set in the 50s, and it's just perfect noir. So I love that as well. I used to read a lot of James Herbert when I was in my teens as well. I'm trying to think some other creepy books I've read more recently, actually. A good creepy book I read recently was a book called The Nesting by C.J. Cook, which is very, very good and very creepy. And Alma Katsu as well, The Deep, which is kind of a sort of a ghost kind of creepy story set aboard the Titanic, which is very good as well. So those are a couple that spring to mind I've read more recently that are good. Oh, and Matt Wazalowski, all his books in the 6 Stories series are all excellent and very creepy. Changeling, especially.
I need to check those out then. I trust your judgment.
I probably said Matt's surname wrong then, and you apologise if you know him. Because I always say it wrong every time. He's such a lovely book. Such a brilliant author as well.
Okay. Some more. Do you ever scare yourself writing your books?
Not really, no. I just occasionally, if I'm really into something, and it's that old thing is if you're really concentrating and you hear a sudden sound you're not expecting, it just makes you jump. But that's only if I'm just really concentrating. But generally, no, because I know what's coming, I guess. I don't tend to shock myself. But you can get into sort of the moment when you're writing something. Certainly, I think you can get very involved in it, and then something can make you jump. that you're not expecting. But mostly, yeah, I'm mostly too busy sort of thinking of ways I can creep out other people. Though I do, certain things, like when I was writing The Burning Girls, when I used to read sort of horror, one thing that would really always scare me was anything to do with fire and people getting burnt, like the idea of sort of people scarred and burnt and stuff, and those sort of ghosts. There's a particular ghost story I read about, again, a burning girl, I think it was, coming to haunt people. I remember really scared me as a kid. So there are a couple of times I was writing a few bits in that where it was kind of like writing some stuff that used to scare me quite a lot. But mostly no, I think very much about how I can creep other people out. But then I'm also thinking about what creeps me out, I guess, as well when I'm writing stuff.
So do you get, when you're reading like other books that obviously aren't your books that you've written, do you get creeped out by writing easily or not?
Not easily by books. Certain things, it's often, and I think with books, it's never stuff that's particularly gory or shocking that I find creepy or scary. In fact, I'm not a fan of excessive gore or torture or gratuitous murders in books at all. I think it's mostly unnecessary. I think the things that haunt you and the things that scare you are actually things that are left unsaid and unwritten on the page. In one of Matt's books, I think it's Changeling, there's a particular theme with a tapping that happens throughout the book with this kind of haunting that's going on, and that is intensely creepy. And it's a very subtle, silly thing. This tapping, but it's real. Dog's barking now. It's really creepy the way it's used throughout the book. And I think things like that, and I think Stephen King again is very good at doing that. I was thinking of I think it's in Dr. Sleep, which when he often talks about, if you've read Dr. Sleep, about there's murders of children in it, but very rarely is very graphic about it, but will use a line such as the child screaming so much their vocal cords ruptured, which is a horrible, horrible thought of describing, because there's this idea of something so terrible happening, it could make somebody scream so hard, but it doesn't actually go into detail about what happens, but it still conjures up an absolutely horrific image, So I think, things like that kind of stay with me. And in The Nesting, actually, again, there's an image of just turned around because the dog's just come to join me, a drowned woman, and a sort of a ghost, and the way that the figure is described as emerging again is really, really creepy. It's not gratuitously horrific or anything, but I think subtle creeps for me are the things that stay with you rather than descriptions of gore and blood and torture and things. It's those sort of subtleties of description and leaving it to your imagination. There's nothing creepier than your imagination. Lay it all out on the page and it suddenly loses its scare, I think, somehow.
That's what I thought was really good about The Whisper Man. I think you recommended me that, actually. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed The Whisper Man because that was so creepy, but it wasn't in a, gory way, like you said.
It's the same, isn't it, as well? Because I remember speaking to Steve, Alex, about it, and how the idea came from his own boy saying about the boy in the floor, which again is so intensely creepy, but it's this weird, creepy thing that kids come out with, So yeah, I think creepiness and scariness is often kind of not what you expect. I think it's not in those big horrific gory moments. Yeah.
It's better than a jump scare as well.
It's that psychological scare, isn't it? A jump scare is great, and I'm still much more creeped out by books and films with those traditional kind of jump scares than particularly sort of gory films.
So let's see. Okay, we've got this one. Have you ever had to do a rough outline for a book before you know what's happening fully?
Yes, all the time. Because normally, whenever you're pitching for a new contract, because most of you sort of have 2-book contracts, you're pitching an idea, and you haven't necessarily written the book. I've normally written a little bit of it, and I have a rough idea. But particularly when you're a pantster like me, the book changes a lot as it goes along. So I nearly always write a rough outline for a book. And I know I'm normally writing it thinking, I know this is going to change. This is my rough idea for now, and I know it's going to change. And inevitably it does. But I think that's fine. And if you are, pitching a book, whether it be to an agent or a publisher, I think they also know that. But I mean, obviously, if you're just thinking this might be something you're asking because you're pitching a book. Obviously, pitching to a publisher, they know you can deliver a book, so that's kind of okay, because they're like, we know you can finish a book. We just need the rough outline, and that's generally fine in the opening, and you have to do that all the time. Most authors do, because they won't have necessarily finished. They won't have finished the book when you're pitching for contracts. When of course you're selling to agents, it's different because you have to have finished the book, because that's the big thing you have to prove. So obviously in that circumstance, you know what's happened in the book and you know how it finishes. But I mean, certainly writing synopsis, if you ask any author, the thing they hate most is being asked to write a proper, full, detailed synopsis, which again is quite often what agents ask for. And I got away with it when I got my agent, because I wrote a blurb and sent the book. Because obviously a synopsis, you have to break it all down and give the ending away, and I can't do it. It pains me so much, to the point that I was asked to write a synopsis for something recently, because I think we were pitching the book for some TV thing or something or other. But I actually said to my publisher, I said, "Oh God," I said, "I can't do it. I can't give away I physically can't do it. Don't make me do it." And they very kindly helped me and did it for me, because it pains me so much to give away the ending of a book.
I could see how that would.
It is. It's just a bit like
building up to it, and then
it's like a magician being asked to say how the trick works. It's like, don't make me do that.
I think we may have answered this one, but what's your favourite Stephen King book?
Yeah, I mean, Pet Sematary is one of my favourites. I also love The Shining because I think it's a classic. Misery, I love for it's just such a tense book. So I mean, I've got lots of favourites actually. But yeah, Pet Sematary I think is probably my favourite, along with The Shining. I know a lot of people always sort of say things like The Stand or It, but I'm more of a fan of King's smaller books, both in size and in kind of more personal books, I think, rather than the big sprawling epics. The ones that are much more about the family or the individuals. I really enjoyed The Outsider recently as well. I thought that was a very good book.
I didn't like it.
Did you not like that? I enjoyed that. But I read The Institute actually, and I
love The Institute. I love The Institute.
I wasn't much of a fan of that. I felt it was a little cookie cutter for Stephen King. I felt a bit like, I've read all this before.
Reading is so subjective. Like, you could hate one thing and someone else like the other. Yeah.
It is. I think that's it. You quite often never agree. My partner and I, my husband, we quite often don't agree on books at all. I'll love something and he'll absolutely hate it. I think The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle was about the one book that we agreed on that we both loved. Because often we're just like, no, I'll say, I love this book. He's like, I thought it was awful. So,
I hope he doesn't say that about your books, though.
Yeah, he didn't. Actually, he's normally my first reader now, but he actually is very critical. He's quite analytical. So, like, when I sent off The Chalkman, he didn't get a chance to read that until I got an agent. So then he got to read it. But now I do let him read the books first, because he has got quite a good eye for spotting inconsistencies or for bringing stuff up that doesn't quite work. So he is allowed now to sit there with his red pen and go through it.
The red pen.
He does. He sits there with the red pen. Honestly, yeah, it's quite terrifying.
That's so funny. Okay, so which of your books was your favourite to write?
That's hard to say actually. I like writing all of them in different ways. I would say The Chalkman, but actually, The Chalkman was quite difficult to write in one way because I was trying to write it while running my dog walking business and looking after my little girl, and I remember, trying to find the time to fit in the writing was quite difficult. I really enjoyed writing Annie Thorne because it was the first kind of book I wrote under contract, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was quite lucky that I'd written quite a lot of it before The Chalkman was published. So in a way, I had quite an easy ride to deliver that to publication. And the other people I liked but found difficult because it was a book I pushed myself on. So which is my favourite to write? It's really hard. It's like being asked to, who's your favourite child, which is easy for me because I've only got one. I liked writing all of them, and I hated writing all of them in equal measure. So again, like sort of children in a weird way. I don't think I have a favourite to write. My least favourite to write, bizarre, and I think it's a difficult thing. I think if you have a book that you found harder to write, it's often a better book. So probably the hardest to write was The Other People, but I would now say The Burning Girls was the hardest to write. And actually, I tend to think if you found it hard to write, it's generally a good thing. I think if you go, oh, that was great, I really enjoyed writing that, you've probably given yourself too easy a ride. It probably means the book is rubbish because you haven't pushed yourself. So I would say I don't really have a favourite to write, but the least favourite to write so far was The Burning Girls, because again, I was trying to push myself, I think, and trying to push myself further with what I was doing.
Did you find that sort of creepier to write as well, because you're now living where you've kind of based your book on, like the church cemetery thing?
It was only after I wrote it, actually, I thought, oh crumbs, because lots of people around here now know, because it's a small village, that, you know, who I am and my books and everything. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to read this and know exactly where it's written. I hope I don't get into trouble. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll like it. I think they'll appreciate it.
You'll have to give them all signed books.
They will be getting lots of copies.
Do you ever worry that you won't get a book finished on time?
Yes. Yeah, I think everybody does. Because you know, there are things, obviously, things that happen in your life personally, but also writing is not something that sort of you just do, and you can do in a certain set time. You know, you have days where you can write really fluently, and days where it's really hard, and everybody gets stuck sometimes. So far, so good. I haven't missed the ultimate deadline, and unfortunately, the deadlines tend to be relatively flexible. There's the best deadline. There's the sort of yeah, you've got another month or so, and then there's the you've really got to finish it by this deadline, because otherwise we're going to have to start moving publication dates, and nobody will be very happy with you. And I like my publishers to be happy with me. I don't want to upset them. But yeah, it's always a worry. I think once you kind of know, excuse me for snuffling away, it's really horrible. I do apologize.
Don't worry.
I think once you know sort of how you write, and you've written a few books, it does get a little bit easier, because you sort of, it's a bit like running, because I run quite a lot. It's a bit like pacing yourself, so you know the markers you have to hit to be able to deliver in X amount of time, and you know when you're falling behind, and you know when you're ahead, and you also know not to get complacent when you're ahead. So I think once you know your own rhythm of writing, it gets much easier to hit sort of the deadlines, unless something really unexpected happens. But there's always that concern that you might struggle to. My last book, I was behind schedule as far as I was concerned, and that sort of pressure actually is obviously not helpful to when you are writing. You have to kind of push it aside a little bit. And I'm ahead at the moment, but it's when you have to deliver, and I think you have to work within your own rhythm, and hopefully, normally, it all works out okay.
That's a good answer. So, someone has said, have you considered writing a series at all, or are your standalone books more your thing?
Standalone books I do tend to prefer. Just because I find that it's a whole new playground each time, and I have lots of different ideas. And I think, although writing a series is nice in one respect, that you get to delve deeper into characters, and you have a character and you can grow with them, and that must be interesting to work with. I also feel it limits you, because depending on who your character is and what they do, there are only so many characters that can go to different places and be involved in interesting things. So inevitably that tends to be a character who's involved, in the police, or a detective, or perhaps involved in sort of, a forensic scientist or something. So I think it limits you in choice of characters, and I think it limits you somewhat in terms of where you can put them and what you can do with them without stretching, credulity too much. And I don't like to be constricted too much while I'm writing. So the joy of standalones is, of course, that you can, have a completely new playground, a new setting, completely different characters every single time. And I really like that. I like the freedom that gives me. So yeah, certainly for me, I prefer to write standalones. Having said that, all of my standalones, as will become more evident, particularly with book 5, do all exist in the same universe. So, they are all part of a greater universe. And there are some little Easter eggs in all of the books so far that kind of indicate that. And when we get to book 5, which I'm writing currently, it will become very clear that they're all set in the same universe. So I quite like that idea that characters can cross from one book to another, and you can make reference to previous things, which is nice if you read all of the books. It doesn't matter if you haven't read all the books, but it's nice for people who do read all of the books, I think. And the other kind of book that I'm working on alongside the current one may or may not be part of a greater story, again, if that makes sense, depending on what I do with it. But yeah, a series in terms of just, the same character again and again and again for 10, 15 books isn't something I could do. No, I just get really bored of them. I'd probably have to kill the character off after 2 or 3 books.
I mean, I'm too impatient to wait for your books anyway, so I don't think I could wait.
Thank you.
It'd be torture. Like in the back of the other people, you've got the extract for the Burner Girls. I couldn't read it because I knew I'd want more. I can't read it. I can't put myself through it.
Well, see, that's funny because that was initially the prologue to the Burning Girls, but just how books change as you develop them. That is now not the exact same prologue anymore. So there's a slightly different prologue, and some of that comes further along in the book now. So anybody who's read that will find a slightly changed book when they come to read it.
I'm gonna have to read it when I have the other book in the plan.
And you can see how it's changed. Yeah.
I think Mia's watching. I kept telling her, I was like, you need to buy the other people. You need to buy the other people. She bought it. She read it in like a day, and now she's gonna read your other books now as well.
Brilliant.
That's all I do, CJ. All I do is just tell people to read the book.
This is what we'd like to hear.
Someone has said, oh, this is my friend Richard. He said, I'm scared of longer books, but I'm going to read The Burner Girls.
It's all right. It's not that long. And we're not talking Stephen King long here or anything. I mean, it was 400, 450 pages. It's fine. It's not like a 900-page epic.
But coming from Richard, that's a big deal because he doesn't really read, but now he's considering reading.
Thank you. Now, to be fair, yeah, I mean, a lot of authors say, oh my goodness, I've got this real trouble editing my book down to 80,000 or 90,000 words, which is what, publishers sort of like for thrillers generally. And I'm always like, I always end up with my books too short. I'm brutal in the edit. I might start off with 100,000 words, and I'm so like, yeah, I've only got 75,000 words because I'm like, cut that. We don't need that. Cut that. So yes, I'm the opposite. I always end up making my books too short because I'm a big believer in, don't need 5 paragraphs to say something that 2 sentences will do. So I
wish that the editors for Stephen King's It did that. It was way too long.
I love Mr. King, but even I would agree that sometimes I think he does need a slightly. But who's going to be Mr. King's editor? Yeah, tell him you can't say that, Mr. King.
This is Richard again. Yeah, I actually lent him The Chalk Man before I came to uni, so he's going to read that.
Oh, cool. Oh, Haunting of Hill House. That's a great book. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think I already said this when I read The Other People at the start of the year. The Other People is probably going to be my best book of 2020.
Oh, thank you.
And I've read a lot of books this year.
Oh, thank you very much. That's lovely. No, that's really nice to hear because there are so many great books out there. I feel a bit behind with my reading again this year. And normally I get a lot of proofs as well, but of course, publishers don't know to send out proofs as much. And I don't read electronic copies as well. So I sort of feel like I've missed out on some proofs too. But yeah, there's so many good books that do come out. And sometimes it's quite terrifying because you think, oh my goodness, I know this person has a book out and this person has a book out, and they're all great authors, and oh crumbs, and will anybody read my book? So, you know, there were a lot published August, September time as well, which is difficult, I think, because I really felt for, you know, hopefully when you get to sort of maybe, you know, 3 books, you have people who like your books and they'll pick them up. And I'm lucky I've got very good publishers who get my books into supermarkets, and I've had a lot of support from Waterstone. I've been very, very lucky. But I was thinking, you know, for a lot of debuts perhaps coming out in August and September, because there was such a rush of books coming out, because so many had been delayed because of the bookstores being closed and COVID, that a lot were going to fall by the wayside, particularly when you have books by sort of celebrities coming out that get a lot of attention. And I always feel it's so unfair to, you know, the unknown debuts who are coming out, who really take that shot more, I feel. I always feel this sort of degree of, like, you know, unfairness.
As soon I read the Chalk Band last September, maybe it was November, somewhere around there. As soon I read it in 24 hours, and as soon as I read it, I literally went to the bookshop to go buy The Taken of Annie Flynn. And ever since, I've been like, okay, this is my favourite author now.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. I know that's the way I feel about certain authors. I mean, like Stephen King. I love an author called Michael Marshall. Harlan Coben I've always read as well. There are certain authors that are sort of your go-to authors that you know, I still always pick up books. I still get so excited, you know, that I like meet some of them, and you know, they've given blurbs and things. That still, like, absolutely bowls me over and knocks me sideways. It's just still quite surreal sometimes.
How does it make you feel to know that Stephen King has read your book? Like, surely that's a massive, like, must make you feel so good.
It is still the strangest, most surreal thing. Yeah, I used to daydream when I used to be a dog walker, and one of the daydreams was obviously having the book published. And occasionally I would daydream that, you know, I would get a blurb from Stephen King on the cover of my book, and it really was such a daydream. And then for that to come true was, just incredible. And it still feels so strange that he sat there reading something that I'd written, and slightly terrifying as well. You're a bit like, yeah, this is nuts. Just a crazy thing, because he is my absolute hero. That was still the absolute best day of my life.
I don't blame you. Like, I can't even imagine how that would make you feel.
It still
that you've made it.
It was a bit like I've peaked there. That's it. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. But yeah, it's still just a wonderful, surreal moment.
What would your 3 desert island books be?
Oh, crumbs. I was like, I'm A, quite fickle, and B, I hate being forced to narrow it down. Let me think. It were possibly The Shining, slightly over Pet Sematary, because much as I love Pet Sematary, I think I would find it. I haven't read it since I've had my little girl, because I think it would actually make me cry too much now. So possibly The Shining. What else is a good desert island? It's got to be something you can read again and again, I think, and I can read that book again and again.
Yeah.
What else is a good book I can read again and again? Spares by Michael Marshall Smith. That's a great Michael Marshall Smith is again one of my favourite authors. Spares is slightly more sort of futuristic-y sci-fi, but it's just such a wonderful, inventive book, and I've read it lots and lots and lots. And excuse me, I get snottier and snottier. I would happily read it again and again. And then probably something else quite long I should probably get, I imagine. See, this is the problem with thrillers and things sometimes, because some of them you can't read again once you know the ending. So there's got to be something you're happy to read again, even if you know the ending. So what else would I take for a desert island? I don't know. How to Escape from a Desert Island?
I would take all 3 of your books.
Thank you.
So Richard has said, do you still get much time to read when you're writing?
I try and make time to read when I'm writing. I sometimes find when I'm doing sort of the first draft of something that I don't like to read anything too similar to what I'm writing, because I just find it can get in your head a little bit. So I try and perhaps read things that are a little bit different. But I do try and make time to read. I like to take a book in the bath. That's kind of my reading time. I kind of get away from my little girl and my husband. I go in the bath, have a nice bath, take a book, size a glass of wine, and do a bit of reading in the bath. So yeah, I do try and make time for reading. I'm a bit behind on my reading. I've caught up a bit recently. I just read Stu Turton's latest book, which I was suitably mind boggled by. And I just, what have I recently read? I've just read a historical thriller, actually. People of Abandoned Character. I'm not sure when that's coming out. That was quite good as well. It's sort of a alternative Jack the Ripper tale. So when I read books I enjoy as well, I've been a bit behind. Again, I like to tweet about them because it's quite nice to spread the book love.
Yeah.
But I haven't read as much as I would like to recently. I'd like to sort of get back to it a bit more. But I think I haven't been on holiday this year either. I think as well, when I go on holiday, I tend to read more. And we've not been away this year, which is a shame too. So I feel I've lost a bit of reading time.
I think with everything that's going on, I feel like some people have either read so much or it's gone the other way. Like I think
yeah, they found it hard to get their sort of reading mojo. I feel like I've just been working. I just really sort of threw myself into. I had to finish the edits for The Burning Girls because I was behind. So I was working really hard on that during lockdown. And then I sort of went straight into writing book 5. So because I was determined not to get behind with book 5, I think I've been sort of throwing myself into my writing so much that I haven't done quite as much reading. But I'm slowly sort of getting back to it a bit more now. And also because, again, I don't like reading electronic versions of things quite as much. I prefer to sort of have proper copies of stuff. And I suppose that's terribly lazy, doesn't it? Because I'm just so lucky because people, publishers do send a lot of proofs that, I got kind of quite used to not having to buy books. That sounds really entitled, doesn't it? It's like, why aren't people sending me free books anymore? What's going on?
Did you find it harder during lockdown?
Sorry?
Did you find it harder to write during lockdown?
No, actually, no. I know some people did struggle a bit with it. For me, no, because I felt like it was pretty much life was very similar to normal for us. We're incredibly lucky because, we both work from home. The only difference was I didn't get to go and write in cafes, which I quite like to do sometimes. And our little girl was off school. So, I did have to juggle it with the homeschooling. But to be fair, partway through the sort of homeschooling, it was getting to a point where I had deadlines and my husband, he edits audiobooks and he had deadlines on things. And it was a bit like, it's a hot day, better just go and play in the garden. School's over, school's out for summer. Mummy and Daddy are working. So I just cracked on as normal. I think again, I think you can let stuff, and it does depend on how you are mentally. It does depend about your individual circumstances and everything else. We are very lucky. We moved to the countryside. We've got a lot of open space. We could get out, just go around the corner and walk the dog through the fields, not see anybody. So we didn't feel like we were locked in. We had that space. And I think it's very different if you're in a city without, that outdoor space and so on and so forth. So everyone's situation is different. But for me, it was a case of, I still have to crack on. I still have to deliver a book. So, I just have to get on with it. But again, I think we're lucky where we are. So for us, we were fortunate. Lockdown didn't really negatively impact upon us too much. But everybody's situation is different, and everybody handles things, differently. So, that's not to say that, I think some people, even some friends of mine, found it much harder to write and just focus because I think it has been and continues to be such an extraordinary set of circumstances that it's quite hard to get your head around. Things change so quickly. And I think, some people found that quite hard to adapt to.
Yeah, I agree with that. What breed of dog do you have?
We have, hey Doris, is she there? Let's see if I can.
Oh.
We have a crazy chocolate Labrador. At the moment, lazy chocolate Labrador because she's been to she goes to doggy daycare once a week because where we live, she doesn't see that many other dogs because it tends to be lots of fields and which is lovely for her. She chases her ball, but she is sociable. So we had this lovely dog sitter that looked after. We went on holiday last year, and because she loves going there and seeing all the other dogs, she goes there once a week to play with all her doggy friends.
Oh.
Casey's been running around with all her dog friends today. She's absolutely shattered now. So she's called Doris. Doris the crazy chocolate Labrador.
No, yeah, I always see you tweet pictures of her on Twitter, actually.
She's a good girl, bless her. She's nuts, but she's a chocolate Labrador, so what do you expect?
Right, we've got 5 minutes left.
Okie doke.
So if there's any other questions people want to ask. I'm just going to show off your books.
Yay! I should really have that. I should be showing off the books. Always forget.
I always keep this one you sent me in its cellophane, and I know that's really sad.
Oh, special edition one.
I don't want it to get damaged.
I have some special editions and stuff tucked away in a special cupboard so they don't get in the sun or anything.
I'm like that. I've got Stephen King's Rainbow books, so I've been collecting them. It's taken me ages to get them. Got one left to get, but I'm so scared where the sun is because I don't want them to get damaged. So I'm constantly like making sure like the sun can't touch them.
There's a few I've tucked away. There's some. I mean, I like to have books out. If generally, I like to have a couple that are sort of just tucked away, so they're just sort of kept a bit nicer, basically. And I have lots of the like all the foreign editions of my the books, sort of all on sort of the desk opposite.
Oh, that's so nice.
Which is really nice. So I love seeing all the different editions that go out in countries. So it's just a really cool thing.
That's like in America, the Taking of Valley Ford is called something else, isn't it? The Hiding Place.
Yeah, it's The Hiding Place. Yeah. I never knew quite why they wanted a different title for that one. And it was a bit of a pain because a lot of people, very nicely, bought both books, and then they were disappointed when it was the same book. And I was like, "No, sorry, it's a different title for in America." But no, we're sticking with the same titles from now on.
That's like Alex North's. The Shadow Friends here is the Shadow.
And it's okay if it's quite similar because it was completely different.
Yeah.
It really threw people. I think in different covers is fine, but I think you've got to keep the titles kind of similar.
Yeah. Do you reread your books after publishing?
No. No, because you would torture yourself with all the bits that you would change. And inevitably, I mean, the worst thing was in the other people. There were a couple of typos that slipped through after publication on the hardback. Which we then corrected after the first run in the subsequent versions. But it's nothing more horrific than people telling you they found them. I mean, it's good because you can correct it, but you would just read it and, you'd spot a missing comma and have a breakdown. Oh, God, why didn't I rewrite that? That's the end. Oh, I should have changed that sentence. I knew I should have changed that sentence. You would just torment yourself. So I don't know that anybody does. I think, you put it nicely on the show. You put that one to bed, basically. Because honestly, as an author, I think you would edit and rewrite forever if you didn't have deadlines. If someone didn't take the book away from you, you'd probably be there forever. So I think the worst thing to do would be to read it after it's published, because you just beat yourself up. You just would, because you always find something you want to change.
I think we're very self-critical of ourselves. That's why.
Yeah, well, I think the thing with writing is it's not as if you're ever in a situation where you're done, is it? You're always improving and learning. You're never like, that's it now. I've written the perfect book. It doesn't happen. You're constantly, trying to improve. It's, you don't reach a certain, even Stephen King's still writing. He obviously feels like he's got a better book still to write. So, you keep on doing that. So you can't look back.
Right. Last question is, do you ever have to rein yourself in when writing?
Oh, in what way? In sort of, don't know, in going into creepy or getting too twisty or writing too much. There are lots of ways. I suppose you might have to rein yourself in. I mean, I'm a compulsive editor. I mean, I think when you're writing thrillers, there is temptation sometimes to always add another twist. And actually, you can have too many twists in a book. I've read a couple where, because the writer tried to be too clever, and you can try and be too clever, it left such a lot to do at the end that it just became page after page of exposition, because it was just there was too much. So I think, you know, as a thriller writer, there is a point where you go, you don't have to be too clever, if that makes sense, because you can have such a thing as too many twists and reveals. And it was them, no, it wasn't, it was actually them, but actually, so I think, yeah, you do have to rein yourself in from doing that sometimes. I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of always going, oh, but what if I did this? And occasionally you have to go, no, just leave it. Step back. Because actually you can go too far, and you can get that, what I call a Scooby-Doo ending, where it just, you know, you've just got like someone there going, but actually underneath the mask this happened, and then they built it. That just lots of exposition about more and more ridiculous things just to justify something because you thought you were being clever. So on that front, yes, I think you do have to, I do try and rein myself in, and yeah, I think you rein yourself in on various things sometimes. I'm constantly being told by my editor that I get a bit too sweary. Like, Evan, I can't swear at home. I can only ever do it on the page. Let me swear.
Oh, that's so funny. Right, we've hit an hour now, so
okie doke.
Thank you so much for doing this. Like this.
Thank you.
This has been so nice.
Thank you for all the questions, and for people coming along to listen to me ramble. And I'm a bit snotty and coffee as well. I do apologise. I'm on the tail end of this cold now, I feel. But honestly, my little girl gets cold in 2 days. She's like, bang, she's fine. And I'm snuffling around for a week. And I'm dying. Oh, I feel so ill.
I'm like that. I've got it off my flatmates, and they're all taking it. They're fine, and I'm just like, oh my god.
I was picking up my little girl from school today, actually, and I was saying the same thing. And I said, oh, why is it? She has it for 2 days, and I'm ill for a week. She just looked at me and she went, age. I was like, oh, yes, thanks.
Oh.
Thanks for that.
Okay, so, right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So lovely. And I think everyone's excited for the Burner Girls. I know I am.
Yay! Yeah, I know. I hope you enjoy it. I've had maybe, I think, one review, which has been nice so far. But it's always terrifying. The worst bit is when a book goes out there and people actually read it. You know, that's the absolute worst bit. Oh God, people are going to read it now. Oh no. So yeah, that's slightly terrifying stage. But I hope people like it. Yeah, I hope so.
One of your other 3 books, I think everyone will.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again.
Lovely.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.